Okay, hello again. So here is a slightly more complex patch. We're using some of the VCV fundamentals and quite a few new libraries that I find some of the most useful ones that are still kind of on the more basic end of things. So let's have a quick listen, and then we're going to split this up into several videos, kind of focusing on each one of these individual parts here and learn about all this stuff. So here's with everything. Okay, so I've got this new mixer. This is from BogAudio. It's the kind of cool thing with this. It's got a mute. It's similar to the VCA mix, except it has 4 inputs. It's got mute for each of them. It's got panning for each, which I'm not really playing around with right now. And it's got a master fader here also. So let's briefly listen to each of these voices. So that's coming from down here. Okay, the second one's more of the sustained little drone melody down here. Very nice. Okay, cool. So I've got that going into a reverb there also. And then we've got Trummer, which is giving us a little kick and a little snarey little noise sounds. So there's the kick. If you're just listening on laptop speakers, that might be a little low, but maybe I can do a little electro thing here. Okay, so that's coming in right there, and then over here is the noise. It's coming from this side. We've got 2 different outputs coming from Trimmer. And then you might notice from the mixer, we're going left and right into our ChronoBlob delay, which is responsible for all that delay sound. And then that's going into plateau for reverb, and then to the audio card here. So all this, let's listen to this first one again, like without delay. So I bring dry all the way down, so now it's only the dry signal. And then it's half dry, half wet. So each of these little sections has its own little processing happening. And then all of them essentially are going from the mixer to the delay to the reverb, so that they're all receiving that effects equally. So let's start off. Let's look a little bit of what's happening down here. So if we do, and actually, what I want to do maybe is single out this one right here, this ADDR sequencer. So what I'm going to do actually is, let's copy this over. We'll just make a new one down here, and I'm going to duplicate. There we go. Just to make life a little bit easier for us. so we can understand what's happening. And maybe to start, I'll get rid of these extenders. So let's just see what's happening. Okay, so this system right here is easy enough that I think we can understand it. So new voice here, this Bleak from Vult is analog oscillator. It's kind of got this beautiful crunchy sound to it, really thick. So that's going into VCA like normal. I've got my typical ADSR here, so that's all the same. Instead of the VCV fundamental filter, the VCF, we're using tangents from Vult, which is a very popular filter, really great. So this is the Volt maker is the one that is creating hardware modules and then studying the kind of voltage that's passing through those circuits, so he can then model it in software. So it's a really interesting kind of project that he's doing with all of his modules. And the filters sound really great. And then from here, let's just go. Let's do that. There we go. Whatever. Doesn't really matter, but we'll do it red. Okay. Oops, turn it up. Okay, so we can hear how this sounds. By changing this pulse width thing, gives a really interesting variation of sound. Changing the wave. So in this whole patch, I don't really have much CV happening, but I could hook up a random LFO, any other type of voltage coming in here, and then open up this attenuator a little bit, and then that would essentially be modulating this automatically, right? Just to simplify it for now, I'm not doing that. So, okay, this Voct input, we don't have anything coming to it right now, so it's, by default, it'll just be like a C4. The great thing about the Bleak and the Basal oscillator that's up there also, it's got its built-in kind of tuner here and octave. So if I want to bring it up an octave, just go like that. Or down. So that's like super thick. Tuning will just kind of detune it a little bit. So if so that's a C. Bring that up a little bit. Right, you can kind of hear. So the cool thing with this is usually if you have two oscillators, if one of them is very, very, very slightly detuned, that creates a really interesting kind of a chorus effect. We're not going to worry about that right now. But this, okay, so we've got the voice going into the filter, great. This ADDR sequencer, addressable sequencer, has 8 steps. And much like our sequence 3 from the VCV fundamentals, we can just control like the voltage that's coming out here. Actually, let me start off. I'm going to initialize. Okay. And in the out here, it's going to give me the voltage that's coming out. So I'm going to use a yellow cable, because I usually use that for Voct signals. And to make it kind of step through these steps, I need a clock to come in. So for the sequence 3, it had a built-in clock, so we didn't need to connect an external one. For this, you do need a separate clock. So there's a number of things that we could do. I want to focus a little bit on this impromptu clocked module, which is right here. So I get so many kind of cool things from this maker. And like in the last demo, so clocked is a master clock keeper. So you can see I hooked that up. It's 120 beats per minute, and it's progressing through those steps. I can change the number of steps I have. Maybe 3 steps. Now it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I can select. Actually, let's turn it off for a minute. So this addressable, what it means is I could select individual steps. So if we go, let's do reset actually. Reset, okay, great. So reset will reset it back to 1. So if I select step 1, now I'm at 1, now I'm at 2, now I'm at 3, now I'm at 4. So this is a handy way also to kind of figure out the notes that you want if you're not using a quantizer. So I could do something like, so how should we do this? Let's do, so you can see as I'm moving this around, it's changing the pitch. By default, if you see this goes up to 10 volts, down to negative 10 volts, which is a really, also just like the sequence 3, that's a really insane range. If we're converting this into pitch information. Previously with the sequence 3, what I did was I hooked up a VCA and then I attenuated that, let's say by 10%, let's say. So instead of 10 to, no, come back. Instead of, right, 10 volts to negative 10 volts, that's then going from positive 1 to negative 1, essentially. But with this BogAudio ADDR sequencer, we can right-click and automatically select the range here into the range that we want it to be in. So I think positive to negative 1 is a little bit more sane if we're using it for pitch. So now if I go up, okay, that's 1 volt. Down, it's negative 1 volt. Okay. So I could. So there's a number of ways I could program this, right? I could consult that document that I had uploaded that shows you note values, voltage values, frequency, all that. And then, so I know 0 volts is a C4, and then, what, 0.5 is an F, 0.583 is a G, 0.167 is a D, 417, that should be an E, I think, right? Okay, so let's do 6 steps. Let's just see what happens here. And I'm going to hook this back up. And hook up the clock. And gates. Okay, so that's progressing through this little melody, 6 steps according to the notes that I chose. Another way to do that, let's maybe going back here, I could do this by ear. Oops, turn that off. So get that to where you want it to be. Okay, go to the next step. Next step. Might not sound good, but let's see what happens. Okay, doesn't sound bad. right? So in that case, well, I'm doing that by ear instead of by looking at my note values. And another way to do this is, which is, like I said before, the easiest way probably, right-click, randomize. So that just gave me completely random values for all of these. And I can just kind of set this to the number of steps that I want. Also, we can choose between forward and reverse, if that matters. And okay, so this is probably going to sound really dissonant, but let's find out. Okay, yeah, it's not terrible, but it's pretty dissonant. So when you do this kind of random voltage, a common thing then is to push it into a quantizer. So before we were using the fundamental quantizer here, and we could select like which notes that we wanted to turn on. This one right here is by JW. So JW modules, a lot of great things in there also. So if we go branch JW, so they have some cool weird sequencers, some other like weird types of like visual sequencer things that are on a grid. But this quantizer is pretty handy also. So instead of the fundamental quantizer where we have to manually select the notes that are enabled, this will enable you to just choose a scale. And so if we remember scales, and let's have a look. There we go. What is a C minor scale? C minor, so it consists of these notes. So we can see the E flat, A flat, and B flat. So if we set this quantizer to C minor, it's going to kind of snap these voltages into those specific note values. So let's listen to it now. And, oops, not that, don't need that. So it sounds okay. I don't love that still, but we can compare. Also, there's all these modules can be bypassed. So if I right-click bypass, now that will play it as if this was not even doing anything. Okay, there's a slight difference there. It's not you know, shoving them too hard into that scale, it sounds like. Okay, so that's essentially that voice. I have one other little trick here, though. Let me minimize that again. Let's just see what happens here. 8 steps. Let's do this. Double click all these. Just make it a good old C4. Maybe the one right here, I'm going to push up to a G. 583. Okay. One other little trick I had going here is a Bernouilli Gate. This is by Audible Instruments. Another like beautifully designed collection of modules here. So what Bernouilli Gate does, which we can see, let's just like not do this for a second, and let's see what this is doing. It'll add probability to your triggers and gates. Let's say I do a clock in right here. Okay. And set that to 50, let's say. And let me do, I'll do this in a different color, let's say purple. And to see this a little bit better, let me change time, and I'm going to offset this first one to bring it down. Okay, so what's happening here? Clock is coming in at a very regular pace. We can see all the green gates right here. Bernouilli Gate is saying that there is a 50% probability that when it receives a signal here, it'll output it from out A or out B. So it's really 50-50. And we can kind of see here, when that's red, that corresponds to it coming out of A. When that's green, this little dot here, it's coming out B. So it's essentially, it's coming out A roughly 50% of the time, and you never know. So it creates a kind of more random type of trigger or gate clock. And you can change that probability if this is, say, all the way to the left. So it's all the time it's going to come out A. You can see that right there. If it's all the way to the right, all the time it's going to come out B. It's never going to come out A. We can see it's not happening there. With this little P probability input, we can modulate that with CV in any of the other ways that we can modulate. So it'll kind of modulate that probability over time. For now, let's just keep it at like 50%, maybe. Or maybe let's do like 20. So like most of the time it'll trigger it, but not always. Looks like that's like coming almost all the time. There we go. So that is another way to add a little variation. So what if I took this out? So I'm going to add another cable here. So if I just click this, I'm going to grab it, but I want to add a new cable from here into my gate. So hold Control. Oops. Okay, and then go to gate. Okay, so it's a little more syncopated. It's not as regular. Also, I feel like I kind of want to up this BPM a little bit. So I could change this, or maybe I could instead of using the master BPM, which is 120, I'm gonna use one of these. So I'm gonna get rid of that. Maybe I'll change this to a ratio of 4. Okay, so now this is going 4 times as fast as my master clock here. Okay, and so right now it's just that C because it's kind of stuck on step 6 right here. So let's just do, okay, so clock is going to progress my sequence through the steps, but then that same thing is going to the probability, the Bernouilli Gate, to actually trigger my envelope. Okay, let's add one extra little note here. Let's do, so that's a G. Maybe on step 5, let's do. Okay, cool. So let's add one more little probability trick here. The reset button here will, no matter where the sequence is, no matter what step it's on, it'll reset it back to step number 1. So we can add a little randomized thing here. So how about division by 4, so it's going to be a slower clock. Bring that in, right? So it's pretty slow. And then give it, let's see, when does that actually hit? Okay, so that actually hits on usually step 4. Okay. So let's say 50% of the time it's going to come out there, which is going to reset. which means it's only going to go through the first 4 steps and go back. So it's going to add a little variation to that also. Let's make that happen more often. So let's look at this. Reset is hitting when the step is already on step 1. So what I can do is I'm going to delay this by a little bit. Let's see if that works. There we go. Okay, that's better. Okay, cool. So that's good for this one. Slight addendum to the last one. So we can see, so it's a little bit better for the resetting. I set this clock to a division of 3. So it hits this. So right now I have probability. So it's always going to come out here. It's always going to reset. And so here we can kind of hear a little more clearly how it gets reset, because it gets reset and it hits this, this higher note several times. So that's with the probabilities both all the way up. Okay. And one final little point, focusing on this ADDR sequencer, which is these little extender modules that we can put next to it. So you can see here, I have not a 8-step sequence, but actually a 32-step. So if I go over to steps here, this still says 1 through 8. This little knob, we can see it says 32, which I can change that however I wish. So adding these extenders, super easy. We just grab the parent one here, and then we just grab this ASX, 8-step chainable expander for ADDR sequencer. So once we do that, we can just kind of plop that right next to it, and then this automatically kind of adds the steps. So this would be a way, just kind of thinking of the differences between sequence 3 that we used before and this one. So this would be one really, really nice different thing. So you could have sequences of arbitrarily long length. I could put tons of those there. Now the sequence is 56 steps. So you can imagine, planning out a really long sequence. Maybe this is going at a slower clock, and these have kind of a longer. Maybe they're in different keys. So this is a way you can kind of plan the contours of a longer composition. Also, if the clock is going a little slower. So that's really a nice tool to have. Sequence 3, even though there are 3 of these, there are only these 8 steps that we can use. So, one way I'm getting some variation with this one, kind of close, like in this 4th little part here, this step 5 here is a higher, it's an octave up, it's a D. So it rarely actually gets that far because we've got this random reset thing here. So at any point it might get reset, go back to 1, it might not even make it to that point. And then also we've got the kind of random gate going to our envelope. So even if the step this step is active, it's no guarantee that the envelope is going to be triggered at that moment. So this makes, instead of a more monotonous thing, it adds some variation that every once in a while we hear this higher note. Let's listen to it for a little bit. There we go. And we hit it again. You can see with this, mostly I just have the 0 volts, which is the C4. This rare moments of variation. I've got 0.5 volts there, 0.5. So that would be, what is that? That would end up being an F, I think, in this scale. This would be a G. There I have a C octave higher. And that's a G. Right? Mostly, though, it's just this 0 volts. So not just this one that's right here, like these other, dials that are different voltages, this adding a little variation, and the randomness sometimes triggering it, sometimes not.